Folks, we are live all over the worldwide internet right now. My name is Kris Kloss, joined with Eric Melikian, your hosts for the Wrestling with Reality podcast. Our guest on this episode is one half of the Heartbreak
Woo,
Express.
yeah, baby. Yeah, I'm strutting in right now, strutting in wherever you are, people.
Ladies out there, just calm down, take a deep breath.
Well, I am married now, so
Well, hey, you know what though? With the Heartbreak Express, that's they're not going to be able to control their urges either way. That's up to
well,
them. But
it's
this is Superstar Sean, one half of the Great Heartbreak Express. He is our guest this time on the Wrestling with Reality podcast. Welcome, Superstar Sean.
Oh man, I'm so excited to be here. I appreciate having this opportunity, blow off a little bit of steam, have some fun talking wrestling with you guys.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you.
Long time overdue.
Yep. Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate that. Sometimes you feel like, oh, probably nobody even, remembers me. But then people, it's cool, man. It's cool. Wrestling's been good to me,
Absolutely. Well, let's start it off. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what led you to professional wrestling.
Oh, man. So I was just the biggest wrestling fan on the planet when I was growing up. I met one of my best friends, my longest friend, Tim. Tim, you're on, probably listening right now. What's up, brother? I met him in the schoolyard when I was 8, and he was the only other wrestling fan that I knew at the time. I actually watched wrestling for the first time. I stumbled into my aunt and uncle's living room, and my older cousin was watching wrestling, and it was World Class Championship Wrestling. Oh. The Von Erichsen, the Freebirds were on the TV screen, and I was hooked. I was absolutely hooked on pro wrestling. And again, I met my buddy Tim, and we kind of fed off each other that we both loved wrestling so much. And, so the time I was a little kid, all I wanted to do was be a wrestler. My mom wanted me to be a preacher. She told everybody I was going to be a preacher. I'd say, no, I'm going to be a wrestler. And then she said, well, you can be a wrestler and be a preacher, but you're going to be a preacher first. So the preacher thing hasn't happened yet, but you never know. But so I was in Rhode Island. I grew up in Rhode Island. I did everything to try to break in there. They were talking about like the mid 90s, like 1995, 94, 95. It was so closed off trying to break into the business in New England. It was crazy. Like the only legitimate school I could find was Killer Kowalski's, which was about an hour and a half from where I lived. Just wasn't feasible at the time. I thought I'm never going to be able to break into the business because they would you go to the local shows, you'd ask about, how do I get involved in this? And they would totally kayfabe us. And I was always asking Tim, I'm like, I don't understand why they don't want to let us in, why they don't want to let us in. Well, it hit me years later. Of course they don't want to let us in. We were 2 of only maybe 10 paid people that were at every show. They're not going to cut their paid audience by 20% by letting us in the business. I mean, there were no one at these shows but us. So of course they weren't going to just let us in. So my family, we moved to Florida in 1996, and we got here, and I was set up at a flea market in Port Richey, Florida, and I was selling wrestling memorabilia. My dad was a sports collectibles guy. He had a couple different stores when I was growing up. So I used to, set up in his store, wrestling videos, whatever. So I was selling a bunch of stuff, figures, bootleg videos, whatever. And one day this guy shows up and he says he's a local wrestler. And he says that, hey, I trained with this guy, Brett Wayne Sawyer. Have you ever heard of him? And I was like, absolutely. Like I said, I was a diehard fan, so I knew exactly who Brett Sawyer was. And I was like, but I'm thinking, sure, this, whatever. And he asked me, do you have any videos of Brett? Because he doesn't have hardly any of his matches. And I said, absolutely. I had like thousands of videos. So he's like, I'll bring Brett here next week if you can put a tape together some of his matches. So I spent the week making like a 6-hour compilation tape of all the Brett Sawyer stuff I could find, brought it with me, never thinking he would actually show up. And sure enough, he comes strutting in, Brett Sawyer, with this motley crew of people around him, and they come up and he's like, I understand you got some tape of me wrestling and stuff. And I gave it to him, and he got my number, he's like, well, you ever want to come down to the school, check things out? I was like, absolutely. That's all I've ever wanted to do is become a wrestler. So again, I'm thinking I'll probably never hear from this guy again. He took the tape, whatever. Well, a couple days later, he calls me up and he was like over the moon thrilled with this videotape I made for him because there was all this stuff on it that he had actually never even seen him doing, from like Georgia Championship Wrestling when he was the national heavyweight champion, from Portland, from this stuff. But the holy grail was he had done an angle on television in 1983 with his brother Buzz and their mother. Their mother actually came and was on television, and he had never seen this footage of him, his brother, and his mother on television, and she had just passed away about a year before that. So he was so freaking over the moon excited about this. He's like, you got to come to the school. He's like, I want to show you around, whatever. He goes, I'll give you I'll waive the, the tryout fee or whatever gimmick he was doing at the time, Went to his school and, I signed up and I started training, man, 1996. And, and Brett has a horrible reputation in the business. Here's the thing. He was a great worker. Absolutely great worker. If he hadn't been so damn short, he would have been a huge star. He was a big star regionally. He was on, World Championship Wrestling when they really broke nationally. 1983. He was a huge star in Portland. He was a star in Florida, but he never really got to the next level, mainly because he was like 5'8", maybe, and at the time that was a big detriment, to the business. Plus, he was a bit of a scumbag. I admit that, he's got a terrible reputation because he was the ultimate carny. You know what I mean? He was always working a scam with people. And, but here's the thing. If he liked you, he would actually take care of you. And he liked me because of the whole thing with his mom and the video and stuff. So he actually took care of me. He never ripped me off. Like there's countless stories of him ripping people off, potential students. Never ripped me off. He actually got in the ring and trained, actually taught me, because that didn't happen too often. Usually he sat in the office while other people were actually doing the training. But me and my buddy Pete, he's probably listening. Hey, Pete, if you're listening, he and I trained together there, and he liked Pete too. So a lot of times it would be just like him, Pete, and me training together. And I'll tell you, man, for somebody that didn't look like he was in shape, he could go an hour in the ring switching off with the two of us, just nonstop. And so, he passed away not too long ago, Brett. So, God bless him. I know a lot of people don't like him, but he took care of me, broke me into the business. So, I always have nothing but positive things to say for Brett,
How was your training? Was it anything like the way his brother trained people?
It was brutal, man. It was absolutely brutal. And, I tell people all the time, the kids, because I helped out a little bit with the WWN wrestling school in Newport Richey, Florida. Mm-hmm. My buddy Francisco Chiazzo was the head trainer there. He passed away in January, suddenly and tragically. But for about a year and a half, I was helping him out there. I was helping train the students a little bit, but there was a weekly show every Friday night, and they still do. It's called WWN Proving Ground. And I was the booker at Proving Ground for about a year and 8 months or something like that. So I was working with the young kids every week. And I would tell them all the time, you guys have it. They would, how kids are, man. They'll bitch and moan about everything, but as I tell them, you guys have it so freaking easy. You've got no clue how easy you guys have it, compared to, I didn't break in the 70s or something. I broke in 1996, but the training was brutal. The first 2 weeks of training, even though I was smart to the business, but they technically didn't smart me up for the first 2 weeks. It was all, we started out shooting on the mat. It was like, we didn't even get into the actual ring. We were on the mats outside, and Brett would make us go, we would shoot, and we would have to prove ourselves worthy of actually getting into the ring. And then if you proved yourself worthy of getting into the ring, he'd make you run the ropes until you puked. And you literally went until you puked. There was a bucket, and it was, because we're talking Florida. I started training in the summer, and there was no air conditioning, and there was a solar panel above the ring to make it even hotter in the ring. So it was probably 120 degrees training. So you would just run until you puked. It was, yeah, man, it was brutal. My first 3 months of training, I got a hairline fracture on one of my legs. It's still all kind of messed up. I tore my shoulder up. I broke 2 fingers. I broke 3 ribs, and I got a stinger in my neck, which I thought at the time I was paralyzed from. But yeah, it was brutal, man. It was like, I was still living with my parents at the time, and I'd come home from training and I'd be all beaten up and battered. And my parents would just look at me like, what is wrong with you? Are you done yet? I mean, are you really going to keep going back and doing this? And I just kept going back and going back and going back. And I mean, I just wanted it so bad that even though it was brutal, it was, I couldn't stop if I'd wanted to. There's no way. I wouldn't have been able to live with myself if I'd stopped, It was one of those things that was so important to me. And the other guy that was really fundamental in getting me started was Tommy Rogers. I'm sure a lot of people listening know Tommy Rogers. He was one half of the Fantastics, big run in World Class Championship Wrestling, then the NWA 1988. Considered by many to be one of the best workers in the history of the business. Like I've heard Ric Flair, other people say Tommy Rogers, another guy, if he had been bigger, would have been a huge single star. Or if he had come along a little bit later, like he would have been great in the Shawn Michaels, Bret Hart era of WWF, because this guy could go. And he was training because he was training for a comeback. The WWF at the time, I don't know if you guys remember, they had for a short window of time, they were doing a light heavyweight title. It was before the cruiserweight titles, and they did a tournament on television. And they had him wrestle his old tag team partner, Bobby Fulton, in the first round of the tournament. So he was training to get ready for this, hoping it would be his next big run in wrestling. So I was just lucky enough that I was always there in the morning, and that's when he trained. Me and my buddy Pete and a couple others got all this basically free training from him. And I remember Bret telling him, I overheard Bret saying, don't get in the ring with these guys and just train them for nothing. You got a name. You should be, getting extra money on the side from them. And he was like, no. These guys want to learn from me. They're helping me get back in shape. I mean, he was in incredible shape anyways, but I learned so much from Tommy. He was not a BS artist at all. He told you straight. Like, I mean, if you were doing something that looked like crap, he would tell you, you look like crap. This looks like crap. You need to keep practicing over and over and over again until you get this straight. And that's another thing about training. The way I was trained anyways, is you had to have those fundamentals down before you learned anything else. Now the kids want to go from locking up to doing moonsaults and stuff. Yeah. And they don't know how to get from, a lock up to a side headlock to a hammer. I mean, they don't know any of that stuff. And I'm not just trying to pick on anybody, but I've gone to a couple of these training schools, last several months, go in there to teach a class and be amazed that the kids that were like the veterans of the class didn't know how to do simple reversals and stuff in the ring. It was like, this was the stuff you had to know before you were taught anything else, before you were taught how to give up. Like, you didn't pick somebody up and slam them until you knew all the holds, the reversals, the simple takedowns and stuff, because they figured if you couldn't do that stuff safely, what business do you have picking anybody up and actually doing a move to them? And plus the other thing that was always beaten down into me was you've got to go to every show assuming that the ring isn't going to show up and you're going to have to just get on the mats and wrestle. And because I've actually had that happen before many years ago, it's only happened maybe twice, where either the ring broke in one of the earlier matches or the ring just didn't show up. And we actually did have to go out there and just wrestle. And hey, if you don't know how to do it, what are you going to do? Well, how am I supposed to wrestle a match? There's no ropes to jump off of or anything. Well, you're supposed to know how to wrestle to begin with. It's just, again, it's just a different mentality a bit. But like Tommy Rogers, especially, man, he beat that into our heads, the basics. And you don't do anything that next step until you've got those basics down, But he was a great guy. Another guy we lost way too young, man. He was a tremendous guy. I've never heard anybody say anything bad about Tommy Rogers. Just the nicest guy in the world. And, again, sad that he's gone.
I want to say during that time, I think he had a short run in ECW.
He did. He actually did. I believe it was after he did the couple things with WWF. Unfortunately, they didn't do anything with him after the light heavyweight thing. He ended up in ECW, and he actually had a finisher he did in ECW. I don't know if you remember. He kind of strapped the guy back and like with his head the other way and would drop down almost like a pile driver.
Yeah.
He developed that in training with us at Brett's with, I think in particular with my buddy Pete Karoftis, again, listening at home, I think. So, but yeah, he developed that with us. And we thought that was really cool when we saw him on ECW using that move that he worked, he basically invented with us, It's pretty cool stuff. So, yeah, great guy, man. Another guy that was involved in those early years was Cuban Assassin Dave Sierra. I'm still good friends with Dave. I mean, we ended up traveling the world together. I mean, we did tours of Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic of Panama. A good friend of mine, that he was actually my first booker ever. And Dave was a tough guy, man. Like you went out, like me and Pete were in the opening match a couple times. And, he told us before we went out there, you don't do this, you don't do that, you don't do the other. If you do any of this stuff, I'm coming out there and I'm beating your ass in front of your mom and dad that I know are here watching you. I mean? And he was serious, man. It was no joke. He took that. It was serious, man. It was serious business. And the Dave's a fantastic guy. Dave, if you're listening, love you, brother. Another great guy, him and his wife, Paula. So yeah.
It's funny you bring that up because back in the day, let's go forward. You go to a wrestling show now, the guys in the first match are doing what they're doing in the last match in the main event. There's nothing different. And when I broke into, it was one of those things, there were a list of things you didn't do in the first 3 or 4 matches.
Right. But I remember even now I'll watch one of my favorite things to do is watch old Boston Garden, Madison Square Garden shows on YouTube. The stuff I grew up with, like in the 80s and stuff. And there was a pacing to all those shows that you don't have anymore.
Right. Yeah.
You had the opening matches. You had your Barry Horowitz against a Paul Roma.
Right.
Where they had a great classic match, but you didn't see them going out of the ring. You didn't see them do anything crazy. They started off slow, but they told a story. It was good. It was exciting. It built, but they weren't going to do what Hulk Hogan and Randy Savage were going to do in the main event when they're brawling all over ringside and Hogan's bleeding and stuff. There was a pacing to the whole night. Even if Hogan and Savage went on, a lot of times they would go on right before intermission, but then they would come back from intermission. You would kind of start over again. Yeah. You'd still have that pacing again until the final match of the night. And I swear, man, nobody gets that anymore. I shouldn't say nobody, but a good majority don't get that anymore. And when I'm booking shows, I try to do that. I try to set the pace for the guys and make the guys understand that everybody has a role, for the night and be a complete package of a show instead of one main event after another the whole night, which to me fries the brains of the fans. Like it burns them out. Yeah. If you've seen everything in the first match, you've got nothing to look forward to in the last match.
I would say, like you said, not everybody, but you would think the promoters would get that because they're the ones, the booking and the promoters would get that because they're the ones laying the show out. But it's amazing how many of the guys in charge of the shows don't implement that or
just,
maybe get
butt heads with people all the time. Like if I'm involved, creatively in the show, I might not be the sole booker, but sometimes there's different shows where I'll be like on a committee, which I hate, but I'm like giving input and I'm telling them exactly what you're saying, man. There's got to be a pace. You can't burn the people out, and it's like talking to a wall most of the time. Because they all want to hot shot everything. They all want everything to be like, every show has to be WrestleMania. But if every show was WrestleMania, there'd be nothing special about WrestleMania.
Absolutely.
Right? So, like, I think back to the cards when I was a kid, especially. I mean, I'm going to keep going back to the 80s because that's when I grew up. But, like, the big shows would be like that. Like, your Starcades would have, like, 5 or 6, blood matches on it and different gimmicks and title matches. But, Starcade was once a year. And they'd build up storylines for 6 months going up to, sometimes a year going up to a big blow-off show like that. But, but even then they would hot shot a little bit too much because they talked about how the Carolinas different times would get, got burnt out by some of Dusty's booking. Even though Dusty's my idol, he sometimes would go a little bit overboard with that stuff,
Absolutely. I agree. Sometimes less is more. And if there's nothing to look forward to, why are the people going to return and buy a ticket?
Exactly. Absolutely. No doubt about it. But yeah. We're going to change the world someday here with the wrestling business again. We're going to bring it back.
Only hope, right? Well, tell us how you formed the tag team, the Heartbreak Express, with your tag team partner, Phil Davis.
Yeah. So, Phil and I, Phil and Scott, my two brothers from another mother, I met them probably around 19. They could tell me exactly. These guys are like encyclopedias of everything. They could tell me the exact date we met, but we met in an indie show, and I hit it off with those guys right away because we all had a love for old school wrestling. Like, I was the only guy they knew in the local business that knew what World Class Championship Wrestling was and was a fan and stuff. So we hit it off over this big time, this love of older wrestling, and we became fast friends. My buddy Pete and my buddy Tim, again, my lifelong friend Tim, who's managed as Vic Slohan. He's been an announcer as Jake Cerrone and other. He's been on all kinds of different ways in the business. He's watching right now too. Hey, Tim. But Tim, Pete, and I started our own promotion in 1998 called New Breed Pro Wrestling in Largo, Florida. And we were running shows. I mean, we probably had no business running shows. Like, I'd been in the business a year and a half and started running shows, But Phil and Scott they're self-trained. These guys were like prodigies. They're twin brothers, and they taught themselves how to wrestle, watching old tapes from like the 50s and stuff. They're watching your Luthezes and those Al Costellos, Kangaroos, those types of guys. They taught themselves how to wrestle in their living room and in their backyard. And when we met these guys, they actually that's what happened. They came to Brett Sawyer's school as well. And they asked if they could get in the ring. Again, they had no formal training, and they got in the ring and blew everybody away. Like, just having this masterpiece of a match. They were just absolute prodigies. So we were booking them wrestling against each other on our early shows. And then slowly I started wrestling Phil, and Scott started wrestling somebody else as we got more comfortable with each other and stuff. But at one point I almost quit the business because things weren't going anywhere. This is like 1999, 2000, probably 2000. Things weren't going anywhere. I'm like, what am I doing wasting my time with this? I was pretty much done with wrestling. And I found out about this little show that was happening in Zephyr Hills. It was at a place called Joe Bob's. And it's exactly like how it sounds, like a total redneck sports bar. And they had a makeshift ring that they built that sat in the little courtyard next to this dive bar restaurant. And they did shows there every Friday night. And we were invited to just go over and wrestle. And we thought, well, what the heck, we'd go over. And I'll never forget, me and Phil and Scott, we walk into the quote unquote locker room, which was the back of the bar. And the promoter asked us what we were going to wear. Well, we pulled out our wrestling boots and our tights. And the guy goes, "You've got wrestling boots? You guys have wrestling boots?" And we're like, "Yeah." He goes, "You're the main event tonight." And they put us in the main event because we were the only guys on the show that had wrestling boots. So we ended up, we had a great time. It was just this like total like dump dive. But we started going every Friday night wrestling there. And slowly other guys in Florida, like guys that became pretty good names, like Steve Madison, Ended up having a great run in Japan. He worked for WWE for a while. He started there. Eddie Torres started there. Just a bunch of guys. And we had this little, basically we ended up taking over the show, and we had this show every week for like 2 years. And it was over the course of doing this weekly show that Phil and we just happened to do an angle that one week and said, hey, why don't we do this? And why don't we start teaming up? And it wasn't meant to be like a long-term thing. It was just, our weekly angle. So we did it. It was a lot of fun. We started getting over. Then we started buying matching gear and taking it a little bit more serious. And then pretty soon, other promoters were showing up at Joe Bob's and seeing us and started inviting us to their shows. And that just kind of went like that. Honestly, Sal Hamoy, I'm not pronouncing his name right. I've known him for 25 years. I can't pronounce his name. Sal of FIP WWN. He showed up one week and saw Phil and I teaming up, and he was starting his promotion, FIP. And at the time, it was going to be affiliated with XPW, and that didn't end up working out. But he booked us. We were on the very first FIP show, and then we became his regular heel tag team. Then he eventually got the relationship with Ring of Honor, and that's kind of what made our career take off. Was Sal did the DVDs, all the production for Ring of Honor, and he launched FIP kind of on the back of that, and they had a distribution deal in stores all over the world. So like the Best Buys. Did you guys remember FYE?
Yeah, and by the way, when I was with Big Vision Entertainment, we were the ones that distributed the FIP ones. I know for sure.
Oh, nice, awesome. Yeah, because so for a while there, we'd walk into a store and our DVDs would be sitting there in the FYEs or the Best Buys. So that's really what made Phil and I take off as the Heartbreak Express, because all of a sudden, and then Ring of Honor started bringing us up and doing dates there. We didn't work a ton of dates there, but we did some pretty major shows in Long Island and Philadelphia, places like that. So then we were on the Ring of Honor DVDs, and then they put the FIP tag titles on us, and then they were putting our matches sometimes as a special feature on the Ring of Honor DVDs. And, for anybody watching now that doesn't realize how big DVDs were at the time, and that was the only way you watched the real hardcore stuff was, you on the DVD. We didn't have streaming. And if you did, who had a connection that would actually work enough to watch something, So, it was huge. And that's what caused us to start getting booked overseas. We got booked in England. We got booked in Austria. We got booked all over Central America. And, of course, all over the United States. So that's kind of how it really was almost by accident, or providence or whatever you say, that, we had this fun little show in front of 20 people a week. And we were discovered that way by bigger promoters, and it just started rolling. So that's, and we had a great run because of it. So thank you to Sal. Thank you to Joe Bob, wherever you are.
By the way, Moonshine and Marshmallows, Joe Bob's.
Yeah, Joe Bob's was quite a place. It's like one of those places. It's become a place of legend in Florida, especially like Central Florida. Like everybody remembers Joe Bob's, and it was just, it's not even there anymore. I think it got demolished, but I don't know. It was like backyard wrestling, but at a higher level, where we were actually trained and knew what we were doing. But it was it was a great place to learn. Let's put it that way. Nothing beats, like, if any of the kids listening right now, if you have anywhere you can go and wrestle on a weekly basis, nothing will get you to the next level more than being in front of a crowd on a weekly basis. And it doesn't have to be hundreds and hundreds of people, tens of people, 10, 15, 20 people. You still have to go out there and get a reaction from them. And to go out week after week after week, like I said, sometimes for years, that's what it did for us, was it made us grow so much, as not just our moves, not just holds, but being able to work that crowd, get a reaction from just a few people, and get them to keep buying a ticket every single week. It's such an incredible learning experience. And again, so many of us went from Joe Bob's to doing a lot of really cool things because it was a place for weekly work. And there wasn't many places at the time you could get that weekly work. And that's why I tell everybody, like my kids, that when I was booking Proving Grounds, weekly work, man, you know, I booked, it was like in 18 months, I booked, I think 73 shows in 18 months. And, you know, those kids, you know, I've used them primarily the same kids. And a lot of them are starting to do big things now. So not taking any credit for that, but that weekly work, man, makes such a difference.
Now, you did a lot of Ring of Honor work and FIP work during this time frame that you were discussing. Did you ever have any run-ins with CM Punk? So we're totally, yeah, man, I said my life was an open book. I'll tell you this right now. I don't know him how he is now, but I'll tell you right now, CM Punk is the biggest asshole I've ever met in the wrestling business. By far the biggest asshole I've ever met in the wrestling business. I don't know if he's like that anymore. He might be Phil, you might be an incredibly nice guy now. I don't know. At the time you were a dick. I'll tell you how bad. I'll tell you a CM Punk story, okay? A bunch of us are on the road, independent show in Florida. We had taken off. We had all left, I believe, from Tampa. It was about a 3-hour drive each way to this small town we were wrestling in. We went, we did the show. We were coming back. There was this all-night diner was the only place that was open for dinner after the show. So on the card, you've got Bryan Danielson, you've got Samoa Joe, you've got, I believe, Jamie Noble, just a bunch of guys that ended up being huge in the business. You know, Roderick Strong. Well, they were already big in the business, but became huge. And CM Punk was with us. All of us go in there to eat together at this restaurant. Punk goes, gets his food, and eats in the car because he didn't want to sit at the same table as the rest of us. Okay, that was typical. That's just how he was. He was always like that. Always like that. So, yeah. Total douchebag. And again, my apologies, Punk. If you're listening to this, you might be an incredibly nice guy now, but man, I hope he's grown as a person. What did you think about the whole AEW scuffle he had with the Young Bucks and a few of those guys after one of their big pay-per-views?
I mean, I think I saw a quick clip of it. I've got no idea what that was about, honestly. You know, I mean, he might have been complete. I have no idea. I don't. Again, he might be the nicest guy in the world now. It's been a long time since I've seen him. He might be the greatest guy in the world. So I feel even bad telling that story. But man, you don't even know how bad, mean. He was legitimate. He was like a bully. He was a bully in the locker room to people. He was a douche. You know, he really, the first time Phil and I worked for Ring of Honor, it was a big show. It was actually his last. I think it was his last. I'm probably getting my dates mixed up, but it was a big show. I don't know. It was probably 3,000-4,000 people. We had flown into New York City, some LaGuardia. We had made the trip to Long Island. We come walking into the locker room, you know, so excited. We walk in the door. The first thing we hear is, "Oh my God, the Heartbreak Express are booked on Ring of Honor." Well, I guess that's the end of this company. Anybody, even the shittiest guys, can end up on Ring of Honor. Like, he's just going off in front of everybody in the locker room about how he can't believe the Heartbreak Express have been booked on Ring of Honor. And it's just like, and the thing was, he wasn't like ribbing us. Like, everybody ribs each other and good nature and stuff. It wasn't like that. It was like he was an absolute douchebag. You know what I mean? That's just how he was. But it wasn't just to us. He was like that to pretty much everybody. So,
well, back in the early 2000s when YouTube started taking off.
Yeah. You there, Eric? I think we lost Eric there.
I think you probably bounced back. This has happened.
There you are.
Yeah, there we are. But yeah, no, back in the early 2000s, though, you guys were gaining quite a following. You guys, not were only on Ring of Honor shows, but you guys were all over YouTube. Like, I want to say you were probably the first tag team to really go out there and promote yourselves. There were all these promo videos of you guys. Yeah. Like, you guys did a really great job of all that.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, it was early in its infancy. You know, one of our videos has like, I think at the time it had like 120,000 views or something, you know, like, which was absolutely huge for us. I mean, you know, and it's just a little different now. I mean, try to get 100,000 views of anything these days, you know, I mean, it's just, you know, but no, we were lucky. Yeah, we tried our best to promote ourselves, and it was a different world then. I mean, we started out, like when we first started getting booked places as the Heartbreak Express, we were still sending out VHS tapes to places, you know, VHS tapes with a typed up resume we were sending to people, you know. I remember what's his name? One of the Rotten brothers, Ian Rotten. You guys remember Ian Rotten?
Yeah.
Yes.
I remember we were at a show at the ECW arena. Actually, we were working for Shakara, and we walked in, and I walked up to Ian Rotten, introduced myself, and he looks at me, goes, "Oh my God, you guys are the ones that keep sending me those damn videotapes every week." He's like, "Would you stop sending me those?" But that's how you got yourself out there at the time, you know. There was no just, you know, emailing video files to people and stuff, you know. It's a different world now. Now, you know, I see all the kids, they, you know, they want to get a booking, they just make a Facebook post and say, "I'm accepting bookings now." I don't know if that works, but I mean, it used to be so much harder. Yeah. But again, though, on the flip side of that is there's so many guys on the indie scene now trying to break in and try to make a name for themselves. I mean, it's definitely, I think, a little harder to stand out now as well. I mean, everybody and their brother is a wrestler now. I mean, I hate to say it, and sister or whatever.
Well, I hear in Southern California, in the LA area, on any given weekend, some weekends, there's like 7 or 8 shows going on anywhere. So there's definitely plenty of work.
And where I just left and lived for, you know, 25 years, in Tampa Bay, there'll be 5, 6, 7 shows just in the Tampa area on a Saturday. Yeah, it's insane. It's it literally has gotten so, like, I couldn't keep up with it. Like, I'd be like at you know, I'd be at a show and somebody would be like, "Oh, well, I'm at this show like across the town." I'm like, never even heard of that promotion. Like, where did they come from? And like, you know, there'd be like 3 different companies I've never even heard of before that all those, and everybody wants to run in Tampa. It's one of those places, like, because it's got that big wrestling history. Everybody wants, you know, so you got promoters sometimes from all over the country will come in to run Tampa, you know, thinking they're going to be the next Eddie Graham. And, you know, there's so much competition. It's just insane, you know, but still a very loyal fan base for the most part in the Tampa area. A lot of great fans there, fantastic people. So
now, before I let Kris take it, wanted to ask you, because you were talking about how you're in the Tampa area, or were in the Tampa area for a lot of your career. Did you ever have any involvement with Steve Keirn, FCW, or what was the vibe like during that time when WWE had their developmental territory?
You know, I wasn't really involved in that much. My brother Scott Davis, he worked a lot at Keirn's school. My buddy Mike Patrick, I'm sure you guys know the Dirty Blondes.
I've heard of them, yes.
Yeah, so Mike is one of the Dirty Blondes. He was trained by Steve Keirn, and but I really had no involvement with. It's one of those things where Tampa's a big small town. Like, I would run into Steve just few weeks ago. I ran into him while at the local grocery store. He was actually, I saw this guy over by the produce. He's just staring at a tomato, and I'm like, why is this like? It kind of caught my eye that why is this guy just like standing there for a really long time staring at this tomato? And, and I realized that it was Steve Keirn. And I just, I walked up to him. I'm like, "Mr. Keirn, can I help you with that tomato?" And he just like kind of like jumped. And I'm like, I had no idea what he was doing. But, Tampa's a great place because everybody knows everybody. At least that's how it had been for the last, many years. And we had something called the Legends Lunch that Bob Cook, hey, Bob, if you're watching, Brian Blair, other guys put together. Every 3 months, everybody gets together from the business. So, guys like Keirn, Jerry Briscoe, those guys you know, you just see them all the time, but I had no real involvement with Steve. It always felt like it was a good thing for the business. I mean, like Steve Madison was a big part of FCW. He was Kern's assistant coach, I believe. So one of our Joe Bob's guys that, you know, ended up having a tie in there. But yeah, Kern's a great guy. You know, everybody, all those old timers or veterans from the Tampa scene, man, they've always been fantastic to all the younger guys. I consider myself a younger guy, but compared to them, you know, the Buddy Colts, again, the Jerry Briscoes, the Ron Basses. You know, Ron Bass became one of my mentors, really good friend. You know, these guys were always great about taking us younger. Mike Graham, another one, like, what a tragedy that we lost Mike Graham when we did. Mike was a fantastic guy. Mike would come to the local shows all the time and just come to the back and give us advice and talk with us. Phil and I did an angle with Mike Graham and Pat Tanaka once. It was fantastic. These guys always treated us just wonderfully, you know, and that's why, like, when you talk about like somebody like CM Punk, and I don't mean to keep, like, again, he could be the greatest guy in the world right now, but somebody like that to me is like here compared to like a Dusty Rhodes. Like for me, it was like up here, and like Dusty Rhodes, I got to tell you, he took me and Phil like under his wing. You know, he was so good to us. He was so nice to us, like beyond nice to us, as far as treating us as one of the boys. And, you know, just somebody like Dusty Rhodes was so good to us when we were just making a name for ourselves, you know? And we've experienced so much kindness from people like that to me are like, you know, Dusty's like, could be on the Mount Rushmore of professional wrestling. And for somebody like him, to really be so kind to us, you know, when we were just trying to make a name for ourselves and giving us advice and helping us out. And, you know, there's so much more positivity than there is negativity.
Yeah.
Like, as I've experienced with people in the business that have really been huge names. And, but somebody like Dusty, like, I will be eternally grateful for how just friendly he was to us. I mean, it's not like, you know, I went to like his house for barbecues or anything, but like he was just so friendly to us in the locker room, you know, would have us sit with him and just talk with him. And there were a couple times where we were having an issue. There was another kind of a big name guy that was giving us some crap on a show one night. And because he didn't think we should be in the same locker room as them on a show. And Dusty came to our defense and told them, those are my boys. They're allowed to be in here. And I'll never forget that, man, because it felt so incredible for somebody like Dusty Rhodes to defend us against this other big name guy that was kind of being a bully to us and say that we were his boys, you know. I'll take that with me to the next side, you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So Sean, we were talking a little off air, and you and I have some interestingly in common. I mean, we like you. Oh, there are other things that we crossed paths with that we already talked about indirectly, like my work with Big Vision Entertainment and your work coming in through the DVDs and all that. Which the public relations director I was at the company, so I was the one calling. I was the one that would be on the phone with Fry's, with Best Buy, and
wow.
Yes.
Yeah.
And other DVDs we put out there. But we also have in common, at one point in time, we were both each involved with a very big time potential as far as national exposure. I worked with a company called Classic Wrestling Revolution, who was formed, which was formed by Bill Townsend, who started LinkedIn and Lyco. So this was Silicon Valley billionaire, and I still keep in touch with him. And we did the pilot. I worked with Roddy Piper, and unfortunately, a couple of weeks before he passed.
Oh wow!
And it was we had a contract with Apple TV, and it was, you know, health insurance, all this stuff. Now, ironically, you have a very similar story And can you give us a timeline and talk a little bit about this potential competition league for WWE and how close this was to becoming a thing, and what were all the nuts and bolts, if you would?
Oh man, it's funny. It's one of those things where almost it's kind of surreal when I think back on it.
Yeah.
And I gotta tell you, in some ways, I think I've blocked some of it out because it became such in a way, it became such a negative experience and kind of a bit of a black eye on my career, I guess you would say, because I was the face. Somehow I became the face of this company as far as behind the scenes. Like I was somehow the Tony Khan of this group, as far as because basically it was my buddy Pete, who I mentioned earlier, Pete Karoftis. We went to wrestling school together. We had our first matches together. Pete went on to be a wrestling promoter. He produced television. Pete did a lot of good stuff. Well, he had a connection to the Wilpon family, who owned the New York Mets. I'm not sure if they still do. Maybe they still do. Anyways, huge billionaire family. He had a connection to them. He brought me in, and we basically, it originally was supposed to be a reality show. There's so many moving parts to this. It's almost ridiculous. But basically at the time, I was heavily involved with a company that had close ties with Kevin Nash, Scott Hall, Sean Waltman, Larry Zbyszko. And we were doing something, and we were pitching the idea of doing a reality show about all those guys and us getting together to run a wrestling school. And this was the initial idea. And we had all those guys verbally on board for it. Pete put the connection together with the Wilpon family. We met with them, and then it evolved from, well, why are you just trying to do a reality show about a school? Wouldn't it be a lot bigger deal if we actually just started our own promotion? It was as easy as that. Like, you've got a billionaire sitting across from you, basically, and not like in a boardroom, but like on the porch of somebody's house in Tarpon Springs. We're drinking iced tea, talking about the possibility of this reality show and filming a pilot and pitching it. And then he's basically, well, why don't we just start our own wrestling company? Hey, that Vince McMahon guy makes a lot of money, right? Well, why don't we do something like that? That's how simple this started with. You've got a billionaire saying, why don't we start something like that WWF thing, Guy had no clue about professional wrestling whatsoever, other than he knew who Vince McMahon was. He knew they made a lot of money. He's in New York. He's a New York guy. He knows, So that's how it all started. And, somehow I became kind of the face of it and also the villain of the whole thing. Because as the word started getting out, as we started signing, like we went as far as we incorporated, we were signing wrestlers to contracts. We had Vader sign, like Vader was going to make a big comeback. I mean, we had Sid Vicious. We had all these like older guys. And then we were going to have Bryan Danielson. At the time, he was between contracts with WWF, and he was going to be our big star was going to be Bryan Danielson. And we had other people involved. Actually, Kevin Steen was going to be one of our guys at one point. Before anybody really knew who Kevin Steen was, other than, diehards. Word started getting out, and I started getting vilified in the media. Dave Meltzer was writing every week about us. He didn't call it the Wilpon Wrestling Project. He called it the Sean Davis Project. So every week, the Sean Davis Project is supposedly doing this. The Sean Davis Project is supposedly doing that. The Sean Davis Project is supposedly signed a television contract. And he would bash us as the other, saying that we were full of, this wasn't going to happen, and it was, they self-fulfill. I mean, it didn't end up happening, but we were bashed every week by everybody. And everybody in the business was like, they were either on board with us and excited, or if they weren't on board with us, they were just trying to destroy us. And I just got crucified again because I was, for some reason, I was somehow the face of it. And even though guys like Jerry Jarrett was involved in it, David Crockett of the Crockett family, WCW, was involved in it. I mean, there were a lot of big name wrestling people involved in this project, but somehow it was called the Sean Davis Project. And I caught all the heat for it from everybody when it didn't end up happening. And I was telling you guys off air that some people that I was very good friends with in the business don't talk to me to this day because they blamed me when it eventually fell through. And I'll tell you the main reason it fell through. Well, you know what? I don't want to say this could be liable,
Right.
Or, I guess I need to be careful what I'm saying, but let's put it this way. There was a very, very big name in the wrestling business, a huge name in the wrestling business. That's a huge name and a huge part of WWE to this day that put the kibosh on the Sean Davis Project by getting WWE involved with the Wilpons and making a lot of threats to them. Again, I don't want to go any deeper than that just because I'm probably getting myself into trouble. But we were very, very close with being AEW before AEW happened.
So what year was this around?
So I'm trying to think that it was 2009-ish, 2009, 10. I should know this off the top of my head, but again, I feel like I think I've blocked some of this. Okay. But, again, with all the negatives that were involved in it, the positives were I did make some incredible friends in this business. One of the highlights of my life was getting to know Jerry Jarrett. Incredible guy that I idolized. There was a time period where we were talking every night up for an hour on the phone or hour two, and I want to give a huge, huge shout out, if I could, to my friend Barry Rose, who's probably watching this, listening. Barry Rose does the convention. He just did the big Glory Days Grapple Con with Captain Nick in Orlando 3 weeks ago. And Barry is a Florida wrestling historian. He puts on conventions. He's an incredible guy. Well, him and David Penzer had a deal going on, and they had Jerry Jarrett in as a guest. And all the time I was friends with Jerry Jarrett, we had never actually met in person. Everything was over the phone. So they had brought him in as a guest, and I was finally able to meet him face to face. And we ended up spending the whole day together. I ended up driving him like 4 hours to a vacation spot he was in. So we were able to catch up the whole time and talk wrestling. And he made me feel so incredible because I was able to say to his face, I apologized to him. I said, Jerry, I just want to say I am so sorry that whole deal with the Wilpons didn't work out. I'm so sorry that fell through after all the time we spent. And you know what he said to me? He chuckled. And he said, Sean, he said, if I had a nickel for every time a millionaire or billionaire's idea fell through on a wrestling project, well, I'd be richer than I am right now, is basically what he said. So he held no ill will about it at all. And he was just fantastic with me. And so God bless you, Jerry Jarrett. And thank you, Barry and David Penzer, for making that happen. So.
Now, before we move on, there's something I want to throw in. You talked about how Dave Meltzer was reporting about this every week, and your name was being thrown in the mix.
Yes.
Where do you think Dave was getting his info from? And, to where your name was being thrown all over the place?
I don't know. That's a great question. Here's the thing. When this was going on, we were talking to a lot of people in the business. We had a lot of people in the business that were at one point or another involved. Many people that are still big names in the wrestling business, many people that were big names at the time. And I'm talking about owners of other companies. Mm-hmm. There were a lot of owners of other companies. I'm not going to say their names, but there were a lot of big companies at the time that were not WWE that we were talking to about becoming a part of this which basically the idea was that we were going to absorb all these companies and bring them all involved and set up basically a feeder system, kind of like what WWE has now with NXT. And they did for a while with the FCW. So we were having talks with, I believe we had talks with everybody that was of any, importance in the United States in the wrestling business that wasn't actually WWE at the time. Everybody at some point was part of this project, and we had all these things, that's how far things got for a while, that we had all these big name promoters that weren't WWE that were going to be involved in this in some. So people, who knows who was feeding Meltzer? I have some ideas, But yeah, interesting time. Sometimes it's like, oh God, block that all out, block that out. I'll tell you what's cool though. So when this all happened and it all fell apart, I felt like my days in wrestling were over, because when it fell apart, I felt like I had such a black eye because I took the blame for this falling apart. And it was like right after this that Phil and I got a couple of major tours. We actually went on a major tour in Japan, which that was always like, kids grew up wanting to be WWE stars, whatever. I always wanted to go to Japan. I was a huge Japan fan. I, was trading tapes starting in like 1991 or 92, getting tapes from Japan and stuff. I wanted to go to Japan, and we actually got to go over and we headlined in Japan, which to me, that was, I know for Phil as well, that was the pinnacle of our in-ring wrestling days, was being able to go over to Japan. And we worked with so many we worked with Shinjiro Otani, we worked with Masato Tanaka, we worked with Wing Kanamura, we worked with Aki Bono, who just passed away. We worked with so many incredible guys over there. And we actually did main event, I believe, 2 shows. I know at least 1, maybe 2. But to say we actually main evented in Japan, it was for 01. And we were over there for over 3 weeks, wrestling almost every night. And it was incredible. But I'll tell you, I realized when it was over, that would not be a regular thing for me, because I could barely walk when we got back. And I was like, I don't think I could survive another tour like that. But it was a dream come true. And it was also a wake up call that, hey, you're starting to get a little older. You might not be able to handle this type of schedule. So, but incredible. I'm incredibly lucky.
Well, there's a few guys over the years that have said they've been to Japan, and they said just the style was just too brutal for them to constantly go back.
Oh, it was tough, man. I mean, you always hear. So I always had kind of a reputation. I mean, I was a pretty big guy. I'm still a pretty big guy, but at the time when Phil and I was around the 380 to 400 mark, when Heartbreak Express we were really doing our thing. Well, I guess anyway. I was a pretty big dude, and I had a reputation of working pretty tight. Okay, I always, maybe stiff at times, So the only time I've ever been told in my life that I was working too light was when we were in Japan. Mm-hmm. I think we were the second night of the tour, and I thought we were going to be sent home. I thought we were getting fired, because the promoter pulled us aside and was like, no, not enough, like with the clotheslines and stuff. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, no, harder. I'm like, you want me to hit them harder? Yes, And I was like, holy crap, they're telling me I'm working too light. So starting the next night, I was hitting these guys as hard as I could possibly hit them. Like, not in the face but like in the chest, in the, the shoulders. Like, I'm talking not holding anything back. And I remember the first night where I worked that style, we worked with Wing Kanamura, and I can't remember who his partner was, but we got to the back, and I asked Wing if it was okay. He's like, yes, that's what we want. And I'm like, wow, okay. You know, and of course, we came back from Japan. We got back to the States, and we were killing everybody when we got back to the States. And everybody's like, what the hell is with you guys? Would you ease up? And we're like, you know, it's just totally different worlds. Totally different worlds. But incredible experience, any way you slice it, you know. The worst part of the Japan tours were the bus rides. Like, I wasn't expecting that. But sometimes we were on a bus for 24 hours or more. You know, and then you'd get to the building. You wouldn't go to a hotel and sleep. You go to the building, do setup, because everybody helped with the ring setup, and then you'd wrestle, and then hopefully you got to go to the hotel and get some rest. You know, if you were lucky, or you were back on the bus for like another 20 hours to the next town. So,
wow,
yeah, it was brutal. It was brutal, but still an incredible experience. So, yeah.
No, I noticed, I was looking at your social media, and I noticed there's a picture with you and your tag team partner with very fitting, which would be a great manager back in the day for the Heartbreak Express, Jim Cornette. Tell us a little bit about your meeting with Jim Cornette.
So I've only met Jim Cornette a couple times. I first met him when I was, I believe, 12 years old at an NWA show. They came to a very rare trip into to Worcester, Massachusetts for the NWA. It was 1989. And after the show, Jim Cornette and the Midnight Express just happened to be kind of hanging out, and you know, it was surreal, awesome experience. I actually got into a lot of trouble that night because I snuck into the NWA locker room. I was trying to get autographs. Like, I made it like halfway in, and it got kicked out by Ole Anderson and Tommy Young. But so we were in West Virginia wrestling, and they brought in Jim Cornette, and we got to hang out with him for the night. It was very cool. You know, he didn't manage us. I wish he had, but he did watch our match. He seemed to like it. You know, it was just one of those. There was a time period there where Phil and I were literally on the road every weekend, and sometimes all week long. I mean, I could say we lived the wrestling dream for a while there, to the point where, you know, it was basically my full-time living for a while was wrestling, which is, again, it's almost surreal when you think about that. But we were wrestling all over the country, and we were wrestling all over the world. And it was, you know, for a while there, it was just go, 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 go. It seemed like we were living on planes and hotel rooms and stuff. And it was a blast. It was awesome. You know, I remember specifically, we went a couple times to West Virginia, and I remember the promoter picking us up at the airport, driving us to the town we were going to wrestle in, dropping us off at this hotel, and there being nothing in the freaking town, like nothing, and just dropping us off. And I'm like, well, what the heck are we going to, like, and we dropped us off like the day before the show, and there was nothing in this town. And I remember we eventually were walking around. This is before Uber and stuff, you know. So we finally found this little restaurant bar that was kind of like the Boar's Nest and the Dukes of Hazzard. That's all I can think of, you know. And that was like, we lived off the food in there for like 2 days because there was nothing else in this town. But we had a lot of adventures like that, man. We had some good times, man. Phil and I had a really, you know, it's pretty cool to be able to travel the world with your best friend. You know what I mean? It's, you know, we had a lot of fun times, man. You know, we got into a lot of trouble a couple times. And we, the thing I'm actually asked about the most is the time that we were, we're banned from the Republic of Panama. And I don't know how many people you know that are banned from a country, but we're banned from the Republic of Panama because we went on national television there, and we were doing a flag match the next night. And the promoter assistant that was with us as we were going on this television show, and it was like their version of like the Tonight Show. So picture a big, huge television audience, maybe like 300 or 400 people in the television audience, giant set. We go out there, and as we're going out, they hand us these little Panamanian flags. And the guy said, hey, if you want to get really good heat for your match tomorrow night, we really want to sell out the building, go ahead and throw the flags on the ground and stomp on them.
Mhm.
And we're clueless. We're absolutely clueless. We're thinking, oh yeah, great. We're, good heels. We're going to do that. So we go out there, we throw the flags on the ground, we stomp on them, thinking we're going to get all this heat. Nothing. The studio is silent.
Huh.
And we're like, okay, well, we keep just staying in character. Finally, we just walk off. Like the host isn't saying anything. The crowd. We come to the back, and this producer lady comes up, and she is screaming at us, just screaming at us, but not in English. We got no idea what she's saying. And Phil and I are looking at each other like, what is the problem here? What is going on? We get in the van, we go back to our hotel, we get a call from the promoter. We got a big problem. We're like, what? It's like a really severe crime to disrespect the flag here in Panama. Mm-hmm. And he's like, you guys threw the flag on the ground, you stomped on it. They are coming to arrest you right now.
Damn.
And we're like, you got like, is this a rib? You got to be kidding me, right? No. They want to arrest you, and the punishment for this is to be flogged. Okay, huh. So they're telling us that they're going to come arrest us, and they want to publicly flog us for disrespecting the flag.
Wow.
So we're basically told, whatever you do, just go lock yourselves in your room of your hotel and don't leave. Whatever you do, don't leave. So we're going to try to straighten this out. So we go up, we're in our room, we're like freaking out, but we're like, I'm sure this will blow over. I'm sure this will be fine, whatever. No big deal. We end up falling asleep. We had been on the go nonstop since we'd gotten into the country. We go to sleep. We wake up the next morning. I go down to the lobby. Nobody came banging on our door in the night and hauling us off. I'm figuring we're fine. Obviously, this guy was over-exaggerating. I go down to the lobby, and I notice everybody in the lobby stops what they're doing and is staring at me. Now, admittedly, especially then with the platinum blonde hair and almost 400 pounds, I definitely stood out in a crowd, an American idiot. But I'm like, what? What's going on? I go over, and somebody from the hotel comes over and drops the daily newspaper in front of me, and there we are on the front cover of the national newspaper.
Huh.
Okay. This was a big deal. It was a big deal to the point that the vice president of the country held a press conference to talk about it and condemning our actions, as the people of the country were demanding that the flogging happen. It was scary, man. Basically, the officials came. They said basically our embassy started working on trying to get us out of there. They put us on house arrest at the hotel, which basically just meant we couldn't leave. And we were just scared to death, waiting to see what was going to happen. What ended up happening was the promoter, nobody came and arrested us, thank God. The embassy got involved, but basically the agreement was these guys have got to leave the country and they can never come back again. Their passports will never be, they can never come back here again, but they've got to make an apology, and they've got to agree to never come back to the country, and they cannot wrestle on the show that they're here to wrestle for. So this caused a huge dilemma with the promoter, because now because of all the publicity, he's got a sold out show with us in the main event against his local baby faces. And he's saying he still has to have us wrestle, because if we don't wrestle, there's going to be a riot. So what they ended up doing was they snuck us out of the hotel, got us to the arena. We wrestled, I believe, the first or second match instead of the main event. And then as soon as the match was over, they had a van waiting for us. We hopped in the van. They took us straight to the airport and got us out of the country before. And we're being told, because word had gotten out that we were there and going to wrestle and we had violated the agreement, that the police were on the way, the military police were on the way to arrest us at the arena as they were getting us to the airport. I'm telling you, when that plane took off from Panama, never had a feeling of relief like that in my life. And we got back to Tampa airport, I literally kissed the ground. It's the only time I ever actually done that. But I kissed the ground when we were back on American soil. I mean, it was like, you know, hey, I had seen those shows like, you know, well, Arrest, like In Jail Abroad or whatever.
Yeah. That's no joke. I know that National Geographic show. That's a great show.
Oh my God!
And
but yeah, we pretty much lived it.
You guys easily could have been one of those episodes.
Oh, we're so lucky we got out of there, and you know, we got back into the country, and like we had, you know, we got back, and my mom's looking at me, shaking her head, and I'm like, "What?" She's like, "You realize you were in the Associated Press? Like this made the Associated Press, and you know, here in the United States.
Wow.
I mean, everybody knew about it. It was all over the place, you know." So,
what year was that one?
What's that?
What year was that one?
Oh God, what year were we there? 2009, maybe.
Okay, so same.
I'd have to ask Phil. Yeah. Yeah. We had a lot of adventures, man. We had some exciting times, you know. You guys know Tokyo Monster Cahagas? I'm sure you've heard of him. A former NWA world champion. Well, he loves telling this. He loves telling this story about how when we were in the Dominican Republic, we were working this show, and we had gotten so much heat in our match, beaten up. Like we had done an angle. I believe Cuban Assassin Dave Sierra was there, a part of it. But we had beaten the crap out of one of the local baby faces, and we were like, it was an outdoor show. We were changing, and like it was like basically like a shack, like a shed. We were changing in. It was like an aluminum building. And all of a sudden, the building is shaking. Like we're in there changing our clothes, and the building is shaking. And we're like, "What the hell's going on? We having like they have earthquakes here? Like what's happening?" Right? The people were literally rioting, and they were trying to get to us in the dressing room. So, like Haggis tells the story about how they had all already wrestled. They were wrestled before us and changed, and they were on the bus waiting to go back to the hotel. And he's like, they heard all this commotion. And then he said, all you could see is me and Phil running. And he said, my hands are going like this as people are chasing us, and they're throwing Coke cans and bottles at us and rocks at us as we're trying to make our way to the bus. I mean, it was yeah, you go overseas to some of these places, man, and it's like you're back in the 60s here in the United States, man. Yes. I'll tell you. They believe over there, especially when you beat up one of their local favorites, man. It's
that's actually that's one of the reasons why I like commentating on lucha shows, and and it's just that a little bit of that sense of belief, maybe not to that extent that you're talking, but it's quite a contrast from especially today's American audience, and it's.
Well, I'll tell you, there's parts of Florida. I mean, even 10 years.
Well, I was gonna say when I do shows in the South, when I do shows in the South and lucha, those you get a little bit more of that, and I enjoy that.
Well, we one of our biggest feuds Phil and I ever had was with a tag team called Black Market. You had mentioned the Sheik earlier, Joey the Sheik. I believe I went a bit off the air, but Joey was in the tag team before he was the Sheik. They were the Black Market, and we had a total blood feud with Black Market in like 2007, 2008, I think it was. Maybe it was 2006, 2007. I get everything mixed up. But we fought everywhere, all over Florida, Georgia, and I'm telling you, man, we had a couple of legit riots with Black Market. It was because they were such over baby faces, and we had the perfect feud with them because they were the big total badasses, baby faces. Like they were like the Road Warriors. We were the total opposite, flamboyant kind of, pussyish heel tag team, So we had the perfect mix with each other, and we got so much heat, and they were so over that the people just got incredibly into it. It got scary a couple times because we did a cage match in Crystal River, Florida, and we had actually for a while gone babyface, and we were teaming with Black Market in the cage. After like a year of feuding with them, we went through this small period where we were teaming with them, but then we turned heel on them at the end of this cage match. and the people were jumping over the rails and trying to climb the cage and just dumping garbage and all this stuff at us. It was like the NWO thing when Hogan turned, with all the garbage coming into the ring and stuff. I mean, it was nuts, you know. And Gabe Sapolsky actually talks a lot about I've heard him say in the past that which was actually one of the best compliments I've ever gotten in my life, because you guys know Gabe, obviously, from Ring of Honor. He's with WWE. But he said that our feud with Black Market was maybe his favorite feud he ever booked. So
wow.
Yeah. Pretty cool. He actually said that not long ago. It was like, that was pretty cool of him to say that. I had people messaging me, hey, Gabe was just talking about you with some feud you had like 15 years ago. So yeah, good times. But yeah, man. So am I rambling too much here?
Not at all. There's some great stories. I was going to ask you, what are your memories and experiences of working for non-rated pro wrestling that this guy Craig Valentine was behind?
Oh my God. Oh my God. That's something I haven't thought of in a long time. So I've got I always, you know, I have a joke I like to tell people that, or I ask them just to get a rise out of them, you know, if they've ever been in a porn before, and they'll be like, sure. I'm like, well, I have, you know. So so I don't know how much you know about the new porn order. Do you guys know anything about that? That was Craig Valentine
about it, because he was promoting in Florida, but also doing stuff in Southern California at the time, and he involved a lot of porn stars on the
Oh my God. So Phil and I had no clue what we were getting into. We were booked by David Heath, Gangrel, to do a TV taping in Miami. And we had no idea what we were getting into. We just knew it was a TV taping for some new promotion. Something was being done, and the pay was really good. And they were putting us up in a hotel and taking care of all our meals. We're like, wow, this is like a dream gig, you know, except it was weird because it was like on like a Wednesday or Thursday. Like it was weird, you know, but we didn't know what we were getting into. We just knew we were going to make good money and have a good time. Right. So we get to the place and we're in this giant, it's strip club on like the outskirts of Miami, and they've got a ring set up in the middle of the strip club. And basically what they were doing was they were filming a series of softcore. Well, I don't know. I've honestly never seen the footage because I can't bring myself to watch it. But we ended up in a porno. Now, we didn't do any sex acts. We weren't naked, okay? You know, but we basically ended up in this porno playing wrestlers. Our names, they changed our names to the Scumbag Agents. Don't you love that? And the storyline was that we were trying to force another wrestler's daughter into being a porn star. This was the storyline of this thing we were in. And we ended up filming like 3 matches, I think. They were like 5-minute matches. And then all of this behind the scenes stuff with all of these porn stars. You know, I believe, what's the real, Ron Jeremy, I believe, did color commentary on one of our matches. Yeah, it was just a crazy thing. And this ended up being like in all the stores and stuff. And, you know, it was mentioned like in like the adult video, like awards and stuff. And I found about this later because people were like, you know, you're in this, you know, you're in like the adult video stores. Like, that's you, right? Or I'm like, I guess, yeah, you know, and you know, it was kind of, I think it's hilarious. It was a little embarrassing when it came out, you know, as far as, you know, people were saying like, I can't believe the Heartbreak Express took part in this kind of sleaze. Like, we didn't know what we were even doing. We had no clue, right. You know, we had no clue. But yeah, it's a funny little story. It's a great story to bring out if you're it's the first night of a cruise and you're sitting at the dinner table with a bunch of people you don't know. I'm telling you, you bring up that you were in a porno. It's like, you know, you instantly have everybody's attention. Never mind the fact of bringing up that you were a professional wrestler, but, you know, the porn thing, you know, that really, you know, gets a reaction.
Yeah, no, I was just curious because I was supposed to do a show they were going to do in Bakersfield, but last minute it got canceled. Like,
Okay.
yeah, I through Billy Blade, I was going to get paid all this money.
Oh, Billy Blade. Yes, 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 yes. I'll tell you, they treated us great, man. They treated us, they paid us really well. We were in a fancy hotel. I mean, it was great. Hey, you know, I mean, as long as they didn't ask me to get naked, I don't really care, right?
Exactly.
Sorry to disappoint everybody out there. You won't find any footage online of it. But yeah, Craig Valentine. I hadn't thought of that name in a long time. Jeez. That's from the past.
Kris, do you have anything?
Well, no, I just, well, off the top of my head, going back to your YouTube stuff,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I became a very big fan of your work. You are a refreshing, big time, like I think a refreshing throwback in a way to the 80s wrestling when you were doing your thing in the 2000s.
Yeah.
I mean, you coming out with your gimmick and I'm the biggest heartthrob. All the ladies love me. All this stuff, and what was that one guy wrestler who, and the storyline was you were scouting him. He was going to help you, and he lost the match, and because of that, he wasn't going to get to hang out with you.
I don't remember that off the top of my head, but I'm sure. Yeah.
Yeah. And he was like, no, I want to hang out with you guys. You guys are the Heartbreak Express.
That's funny.
You guys were refreshing throwback to whether it was intentional or not. But again, this might be going back to like what we're talking about, how, guys, I think at that time in the late 2000s, it was like the business was reverting back from that the way, like you said, the way cards were set up,
right?
And so with that change, it was like a refreshing throwback to what works in wrestling,
right?
And I think that's a big testament to your guys. How many people remember you guys and the eyeballs you got?
Well, that's incredible. I think, Phil and I were like, Phil was the perfect tag team partner for me. We were complete opposites physically, which I think worked, but it meant, and we worked differently. Like Phil was the workhorse of the team. He's the one that could do anything physically, athletically, whatever. I was more, character, I'm the one that would, do all the bleeding and, the comical, whatever stuff. But we meshed really just well together. I think that there's two reasons. One, we're best friends, Phil, his brother, Scott. I mean, like I've mentioned, Tim, Pete, those guys are my best friends. They're my brothers. When you're working with your best friend like that, or one of your best friends, we were on such the same level, and we knew what the other one was going to do all the time. Like, you know what I mean? We didn't have to talk over things.
Yeah.
We knew instinctively what the other one was going to do. And the other thing is we both had such a passion for 80s wrestling in particular. So all we watched was like the Midnight Express, their matches with the Rock and Roll Express. The Rockers against Tully Blanchard, Arn Anderson, the Rockers against Buddy Rose and Doug Summers, that type of stuff. We studied that stuff nonstop. And truthfully, we stole from those things as much as we possibly could. Anything we saw those guys doing that we knew other people weren't doing now, we stole and made it our own thing. And people to this day will come to me and say, Sean, we saw this spot you guys did, and oh my God, that was genius. How'd you come up with that? Like, we didn't come up with that. We stole it from the Midnight Express, or, even further back, from the 50s or 60s. I tell guys all the time, when people ask me for advice, kids all the time ask me who to study. I send guys all the time to YouTube to study guys like Buddy Rogers. I'm like, don't take the fact that these matches were taped in the 50s and 60s stop you from learning from somebody that was an absolute genius like Buddy Rogers. And his stuff holds up. Just the other night, I sat there, watched a full match between Buddy Rogers and Lou Thez. I ended up posting some clips of it. That match would hold up at WrestleMania today, the stuff that they were doing in that match. Not just the technical stuff, but the bumps they were taking. Buddy Rogers used to do this incredible bump. It was one of his signature things to lead to a finish of a match and to get out of losing the title, is he would do something where he was bouncing off the ropes. It would usually be like a shoulder tackle, hit the ropes again. His opponent would like bypass him into the ropes, and he would kind of jump and leap right into hooking his head in the ropes so that he'd be stuck in the top rope. Yeah. And it would look like the guy was being killed. Like you would swear he was dying right there in front of you, because he was such a master of taking that move. I don't know how he did it without killing himself, because the ropes were different then too. Yeah. They were real ropes they were using then. Yeah. And how he was able to effortlessly do that. And you know, I've actually was recently reading the Buddy Rogers book by Tim Hornbecker, which is a fantastic book, by the way. But it talks about when he developed that move, it was one of his ways to get out of losing the belt. Like he would do like a championship match, be a 2 out of 3 falls match. They each drop a fall, and in the third fall, he'd take that bump, and then the athletic commission or the referees or whatever would come and stop the match for medical reasons, and they'd end up in a draw. And you know, he ended up keep taking the title home. Whoever he was wrestling can claim that they really should have won the title, because the match, it should have been forfeited to them. It was a genius way to do it, but it would have never worked if he wasn't such a master of taking that crazy bump. Yeah. It just, you know, there's so much to learn from guys like that. And the kids are missing out if they think, oh, well, I'm not going to watch that. It's in black and white. There's nothing I can take from that. Missing out on so much, you know. So much. If you're going to steal and borrow stuff from people, don't borrow from somebody that just wrestled on Monday Night Raw this week that millions of other people saw. Borrow from something that happened 50 years ago that nobody's seen since then. And make your own, you know. 100%. That's why we saw guys in the 80s. You know, like Nature Boy Ric Flair, Nature Boy Buddy Rogers. You know, we saw that. And another thing too that you were very unique with, Sean, was when you were getting pummeled in your matches, and then the big it sounded like you know, Louis Anderson crying like a baby, and wham, wham, like that stuff was just, you know, you're screaming in pain. And then it morphed into like the baby in the high chair. It's like, you don't see this. Like, this is awesome. So, and that's just how I am on a regular basis. If I'm hungry, you can ask my wife, Jessica. She's sitting right here. There you go. She hears that often if I haven't been fed in time. So. I think it was one of the shows was like, it was called the Christmas Tree Death Match or whatever it was called. Oh, yeah. I think that was with Black Market, actually. Yeah. And then you were getting, you know, cut. And you were just screaming like you were just like the little kid that was like didn't want to get put to bed early, you know. Well, my big talents in life, being a whiny baby and bleeding. Man, I mean, where else can you make a name for yourself but being really good at bleeding? It was no, but those are the things, man. You remember that, so kudos. Absolutely. Well, I appreciate that, man. I appreciate that. Yeah, I had a lot of fun. You know, I tell people all the time, I was the most unathletic kid on the face of the planet, especially growing up. When I would tell people I was going to be a wrestler, they saw this short, fat kid and just laugh. Well, yeah, you're going to be a wrestler someday, sure, you know. And when I started training, we were talking about my training earlier, I was the worst. I was the worst in training. I was horrible. But I had the one thing that, because I think about all the guys I started training with and how none of them are around in wrestling anymore. Pete, you know, is involved, but, you know, he didn't wrestle anywhere near as long as I did. But most of the guys I trained with that were much better athletes than I was, they didn't get anywhere near as far as I ended up going. And I think it was that's 100% mental. that, you know, I wanted it so bad. You know, I loved it so much that even if I was terrible, I was going to try to find a way to make it work. At one time, my only goal with wrestling was to have a live match. Like when I was training, I was so bad. And like I told you guys earlier, I was getting hurt all the time. Like I was always injured, it seemed like. And my goal at the time was I just want to have one match. I just want to have one match so that I can say I was a professional wrestler. And if I could just get through that one match, I'll be happy for the rest of my life that I said I lived my dream. I did what everybody said I wasn't going to be able to do. I made it through wrestling school, and I had a match in a real ring in front of a real crowd, and I could say I was a real professional wrestler. That's all I wanted, you know? And then it went from that to, you know, all I want is to wrestle in a match outside of Pinellas County, Florida, which is where I lived. Like the first time Phil and I got booked in like Hillsborough County, which is just the, you know, the next county over where Tampa is. Well, holy crap, we're wrestling in Hillsborough County. This is a whole different county than what we live, you know? And then it was another state, and then it was another country. And it just, you know, it just kept going and going and going. And, you know, a lot of times Phil and I would just kind of pinch ourselves like, we can't believe we're sitting in London, England right now. We can't believe we're, you know, sitting in the Dominican Republic. We can't believe we're sitting in San Juan, Puerto Rico about to wrestle, you know? Just all this stuff just seems, at times it was like, this is, and not just the places, but the people. Yeah. We were so lucky to work with so many of the guys that I grew up idolizing. I mentioned Dusty before. I was able to did a couple angles with Dusty Rhodes. You know, I wrestled a singles match with Kamal, the Ugandan Giant. You know, we wrestled Tully Blanchard in a tag match. We wrestled the Midnight Express. We both wrestled the Midnight Express, and we teamed with the Midnight Express, Bobby and Dennis Condrey, in an 8-man match. Wow. We wrestled the Rock and Roll Express 3 times. I could just keep going and going and going. All these guys that I grew up idolizing, and to eventually actually share a ring with these guys. Like I remember when we were teaming with the Midnight Express, and, you know, I'm standing there with Dennis Condrey, and he's telling, you know, he's kind of telling me what he wants me to do next and stuff. He's like, I'm going to have Bobby tag you in. We're going to do this. And I'm thinking, I kind of just started marking out for a second. You know, I mean, I'm in the ring. We were in front of a big crowd. We were in Valdosta, Georgia, in a packed out place. And I'm sitting there just kind of marking out. I can't believe I'm teaming with the Midnight Express. Like that. This is insane, you know? Come on. You know, it's just that kind of stuff that just often like boggles my mind. You know, it's just like I'm so lucky. I mean, how many kids get to grow up and actually how many kids get to grow up and meet their idols, but to actually be able to work with them and be treated like as a colleague of them, you know, like an equal. I mean, it's just, you know, not that I would ever say as an equal, but they treated us like that, you know. Like I said, I go back to like Dusty Rhodes. Somebody like that did not have to be so nice to somebody like me, you know, and just God bless them, you know, for being that good of a person. Rock and Roll Express, Ricky and Robert, what incredible guys they are. They're fantastic. They were so good to us. You know, insisting that they put us over, you know, when we worked with them a couple times, you know, just great guys. Yeah. Larry Zbyszko, we worked a lot with Larry Zbyszko. You know, this guy that, you know, headlined Shea Stadium against Bruno Sammartino, one of the biggest matches in the history of wrestling, one of the biggest cards in the history of wrestling. And here he's teaming with the Heartbreak Express, you know, on the, when we met in San Francisco, when we were out there, I have a story with that. You know, Phil and I got into the hotel, and we were kind of, you know, being a little shy because all these mega stars are all around us, and we're kind of figuring out where to go and stuff. And I'll never forget, Larry Zbyszko comes walking in, and he walks right past all the Kevin Nash, like all the big stars, and all I hear is, "Oh, Heartbreak Express, what are you doing here?" And they come straight to us, you know, and everybody stops and looking at like, you know, who's Larry going straight to, you know, and he's making this big deal out of us in the hotel. And, you know, it was just, it's so cool, man. It's just so, you know,
that is
such a cool memory, you know.
And that's when we all first met was at that. And Unbelievable. Yeah, I did that,
Yeah.
and that's when I was doing commentary with Zabisco. So that was another
Oh, that's
dream.
right. Yeah. Did
Yeah,
that ever?
great.
I gotta ask you. Did that ever actually get released? That pay-per-view? Did they ever
No,
do anything with that?
something weird happened with that. It was
Yeah, remember most people didn't get paid for that event. Some of the stars didn't show up. Luger had his big injury.
There were a lot of issues. Yeah,
a
there were a
lot
lot
of
of
issues.
issues. But I would love to see the footage of that because with the that battle royal we were in, Phil and I each got to work with Chavo Senior,
Mhm.
and he was great. And Rock Riddle, he's names like that. And that we actually wrestled another day that weekend, which was crazy too. I mean, there was nobody there, but it was still cool to cool to be working a show in the Cow Palace.
Yeah.
It's just
Yeah.
that was another one of those surreal memories, surreal moments for us.
That's right.
Just
Absolutely. It's quite a weekend.
Oh man, we had such a blast. Like I know a lot of the big stars were upset and they felt like they'd been mistreated, but Phil and I were like kids in a candy store that whole weekend. Man, we had such a good time. We had such a blast. Phil was talking about the other day how he got mistaken for Bryan Danielson by a couple of fans. They'd come up and he was signing an autograph. And, he didn't really realize what he was signing. And then he realized he was signing over a poster. They wanted him to sign on Bryan Danielson. And he said, man, that was kind of weird. And he said a few minutes later, they came up, hey, Bryan, will you sign a couple more autographs for us?
Oh, no.
So he said he just stood there signing the rest of the autographs and went along with it. But, yeah, we had I mentioned Barry Rose, my buddy Barry. He promotes these conventions and stuff, and he did his Glory Days GrappleCon was a few weeks ago. Man, what a surreal weekend that was. I got to meet a lot of my childhood heroes for the first time that weekend, and my wife Jessica and I helped out with the event. So we were helping out behind the scenes with people, but again, man, we were hanging out with my all-time favorite wrestling was World Class Championship Wrestling. That was the first wrestling I ever saw, what I fell in love with. So, Mark Lawrence was like always one of my big heroes because he hosted that show. And, I got to hang out with him all weekend. We, just, becoming, acquaintances at least with somebody that you grew up watching all those years, hanging out with the one man gang and people like that, just it's just so cool, man. It's just, again, kids grow up watching like Marvel superheroes or something. How many of them actually get to meet Spider-Man or Batman or get to, or whatever, the X-Men. And, here I've gotten to not just meet, but get to know and get to work with so many of these legends that I just grew up idolized. They were bigger to me than Superman, Spider-Man, and Batman. They were real superheroes. And, we've just had all those great moments, man. And, looking forward to many more, hopefully. So,
absolutely. Yeah. Well, tell us what you're up to now.
Well, we just, I think I'm done managing, at least for now. So the last several years, I've been mostly managing for FIP and a couple other promotions, Thunder Championship Wrestling, a few others. And I love it. I'm a little beaten up. I've got some back issues, and it's gotten to the point where going out there, even if I'm not doing a whole lot managing, it's been a little bit much for my back. I end up really paying the price for 3 or 4 days after a show. So I'm kind of winding that down. My wife Jessica and I just launched a business. It's Kayfabe Shop. You go to https://kayfabeshop.com. I don't know. We're trying to work out the www. There's some problem with our hosting, but basically we started a line of wrestling products. Right now it's just t-shirts, mostly t-shirts, some hats. But I've got big plans for it. I've got all kinds of stuff I'm working on. I want it to be more than just a t-shirt shop. Not that our designs aren't awesome. She and I do them all ourselves. They're completely original. And the whole idea behind the t-shirts, honestly, I'm actually wearing one of them right now. That's I'm like a pile driver. I'm banned in 47 states. But I'm brutal on t-shirts. All right. I am just t-shirts do not last with me. Okay. And I was so tired of getting shirts. My wife buys me shirts all the time. And most of the time they fall apart after 2 or 3 washes or whatever. I'm just terrible with them. We're making high quality t-shirts. Like the manufacturer we're working with is about the highest quality t-shirts you can get. So they might be a little bit more expensive than like a lot of other people that you might buy from on eBay and Amazon, but it's all going into the quality of the shirts. They're super high quality. Like this one has been washed about 10 times. It hasn't faded at all. It's, they take a beating. They really are good quality stuff. And that's the main thing we're working on, but I've always got other stuff happening. The one big thing I meant to mention this is, since we're on a podcast, I've got my own version of a podcast I'm starting. It's going to be a little bit different. It's called the Superstar Sean Super Show. And it's not going to be just about wrestling. It's going to have comedy, have some different stuff. I'm going to have all my cast of characters of buddies, Phil, Scott, Tim, Pete, all be recurring characters on this. And it's just going to be a lot of fun. We'll of course talk about wrestling, but just a lot of different stuff. Because when those guys, when we get together, especially with me and Tim is just a crazy character. And he and I have actually been play-by-play team for WWN off and on for the last year and a half, or until we moved here. We were doing WWN Proving Ground together, and we have such a riot. We just have such a good time together, and people seem to think we're entertaining together. If you can imagine, he's a lot even more energetic than I am and crazy. So we get together and we just, it's like this big ball of combustion happening. So that's something we're working on. And other than that, you never know where I'll pop up,
You
like
know what?
Like
you and Tim, when you have a certain type of chemistry, like anything could happen.
Oh my God. Yeah. And it goes back again, it's so crazy. Tim and I met when I was 8 years old. We met on the playground of our school, and, we're instant friends. And then, we spent our whole time growing up planning on being, a wrestler, and him being my manager. And we eventually did that. He did manage me as Vic Slohan for a while, and managed Phil. And we would commentate our own matches. We would commentate on the TV and pay-per-views and stuff as we were kids and teenagers. And then we grew up to actually do commentating together. Again, you can see a lot of our work at WWN Proving Ground. I don't know if it's WWN TV on YouTube, but WWN Live, I believe. But yeah, he and I have a great chemistry together. And I think if we do a show together, I think it's going to be a lot of fun. So yeah, it's, it's, again, man, I'm blessed. Blessed that I have friends that have been so good to me, and that, have lasted through thick and thin. I think back to, Pete, again, my buddy Pete Karoftis. He's had a lot of health issues the last couple of years, and God bless him. He's, he keeps fighting through them all. And, I think back to when we were just kids starting out at wrestling school together, and how clueless we were, and how terrible we were in the in the ring. And we ended up somehow making it through to having our first matches with each other, and we're best friends all these years later. It's just, it's a cool thing, man. A lot of times there's a lot of focus on the negativity in wrestling. You hear a lot, so many nightmare stories. You hear so much about, the early deaths, and you just, there's so much. And there is a lot of negativity, but there's also a lot of positivity, and I'll tell you, the friendships I've forged over the years because of wrestling, I mean, they're better than gold. They really are. And the memories, man, the incredible memories, I gotta say, man, there's so many great people in the wrestling business. There really are a lot more good people than bad people.
Absolutely.
There really are.
Yeah, absolutely.
100%.
Yeah. Those don't get the headlines, though. The good doesn't get the headlines.
No, it doesn't.
Yeah.
Those are the boring stories.
Yes. Yes.
Well, this has been awesome. And I don't know if you have anything else, Eric, before we wrap up. But yeah, Sean, this has been a lot of fun. I appreciate you coming on and getting to know you, meeting you here, really.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I've had a
it's been
great
great.
time, guys. I could just, I could talk wrestling forever, man, and my memories. And I just, again, 20, coming up on 28 years since I entered wrestling school
Wow.
and started. And it's been a wild ride, lots of ups and downs, but it's never been boring. That's for sure.
No.
No, just one quick question.
Yeah.
You're talking about your crazy stories overseas. We had
Yeah.
the Ballard brothers, who were a big tag team on the West Coast. They're a twin
Okay.
tag.
Yeah.
Have you ever worked with them at all?
I don't think so. That doesn't sound, and it probably sounds ridiculous that I would say I don't think so, but again, I am so bad with names and faces, and it's kind of embarrassing. Like I'll be at a show and I'll have somebody walk up to me and be like, "Hey man, God, it's been 15 years since we wrestled on this show and stuff, and I've got no idea who they are." And I'm just like, it's embarrassing, but again, I have been hit in the head a lot of times, so I've definitely had my share of concussions. So I'm gonna blame it on that sometimes when I don't remember names or faces. But again, man, for a while there, Phil and I were just we were so lucky, man. For a while there, we were just on the go constantly, whether it was there were so many weeks where it was, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, sometimes Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, where every night we're in a different town, we're in a different state, we're in a different country. And, it's just, again, it's overwhelming sometimes. I actually came across something online the other day that had a list instead of all of our matches. Definitely wasn't all of our matches, but there were hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of our results and matches. And I was like, just trying to remember some of them, because some of them were just like, I don't remember ever doing this. I don't remember ever being at this place. But just great times, man. Great times. I've had a blast being on here, and I hope I haven't talked your ears off too much.
No, it's great.
No, it's been a pleasure to have you on. Are there any other plugs you'd like to put out there?
No, not really, man. I just want to tell any of the young guys watching this, if you are, man, study those old tapes, man. Learn from the guys from the past. Don't be afraid to step out of your little comfort zone of just watching what's happening now. And, step back and also learn the history of this business. Learn the history of the sport that you're in, There are so many resources out there, books, websites, get into learning about this business and learn why things work and why they don't work and why things have worked in the past. There's so much to learn besides this little tiny bubble so many of our young guys that start out in the business are living in. And again, I'm saying this from a couple of years of very recently working with so many young guys. And there's some fantastic guys out there. There's a tag team called Better Together. These guys are going to be major stars in the business. There's a young guy named Benji Neptune. He's going to be a big star. There's a kid named Devin Diaz. Devin Diaz works for the NWA now. Devin is going to be a major star in the wrestling business. There's a kid named Rich Portiello, wrestles in Florida. He's going to be he's already been to Japan a couple times. He's going to be a major name in the business. Buckshot Brian Brock is already made himself a name, but he's going to be even a bigger name in the business. There's a lot of good kids out there. There's a lot of good talent. I've been super lucky to work with a lot of them. And, the sky's the limit for guys like Brian Brock, for example. He's a young guy who's done what I was just talking about, who studied all the guys from the past, who knows the history of the business. And that gives us such a huge advantage. Devin Diaz too. This kid studies all the old tapes. He studies the greats of the business, and that will just give you an edge in so many ways. So that's the best advice I can give.
That's
Awesome.
great. Yeah, and it makes you stand apart. That's the finishing touch, because know the past. You try to emulate people that have drawn money in this business, and that stands out in today's market.
Yeah.
I tell kids all the time, they ask me who to watch. I'll tell them Gino Hernandez, Tully Blanchard, Buddy Rogers. If you're a baby faces, I tell them Magnum TA. There's so many guys that they can work from. I actually read recently something Cody Rhodes said about how he had recently been studying Magnum TA matches from when he was working for his dad and stuff. And if somebody like that's, as big as he is still studying guys like Magnum TA, there's something to be said for that.
Right. 100%.
So, all right, guys. Well, thank you so much for having
thank you.
me, guys.
And Eric, do you have a plug for Vape Siggy?
Yeah, I'll let you do that, and I want you to give out your plugs as well for yourself.
Okay, just hit me up on Facebook, folks. My name, Kris Kloss, Kris Kloss. My email is KRISKLOSS, the number 1 at AOL.com. If you're looking for a nonprofit auctioneer for any great cause that needs charity donations, hit me up, and we'll put a fundraiser together. And for all your vaping needs in Canoga Park, California, Vape Siggy, the best prices in town in Southern California. And that is right there in Canoga Park on Sherman Way. I don't have the phone number, Eric, but I don't know if you do.
No, I don't offhand, but
Okay, yeah, it's on my phone here.
Bottom.
Yeah, and I'm heading there right now. I'm getting in the car and we're going.
All right, it's worth the drive. It'll be a nice drive. But yeah, Canoga Park, California, Vape Siggy. Tell Steve you saw him on the Wrestling with Reality podcast. He'll give you a discount on top of his good prices. But yeah, this has been an awesome episode. Sean, thank you once again, my friend.
Thank you, guys. Thank you so much. And everybody, follow me, twitter.com/kayfabe shop. That's my last plug.
Well, for Eric Melikian, my co-host, and for our guest today, Superstar Sean, my name is Kris Kloss. This has been the Wrestling with Reality podcast, and we will see you all right here next time. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.